Hello everyone, this is Charlotte and we are chatting in cars. This is a podcast where I talk about random topics pulled out of a bag, usually, sometimes. But today it is one that I wrote on my hand because I was thinking about it this morning. There is a disclaimer at the start of this podcast because I do talk about sensitive topics. So if you're feeling not up to it today, that's absolutely okay. You don't have to talk about it. This is one of those possibly darker, maybe more depressing topics I've chosen today. So of course, if you're feeling pretty buzzy today and you don't want to deal with that shit, you can absolutely switch off and turn it onto something more impressive or pleasing or, something cotton candy and sugary. Sorry, I'm talking about the cooking channel again. Anyway, so there is also a disclaimer as well because I do swear. I swear a lot. I'm unapologetic about it because I don't care. Quite frankly, I swear. I fucking swear. Fuck. Anyway. So, the topic for today is loneliness, with particular attention to adult loneliness. I don't know how kids feel. I don't remember being a kid that much. So, the reason I've chosen this topic today is because, dare I say it, I woke up this morning and I felt a little bit lonely. That was very odd, because it never fucking happens. Yeah, so that's my topic for today, and I had a thought about it in the shower, as you often do in your adult life when you're not having an existential crisis. And I was trying to pinpoint why I felt lonely, and I know lots of people feel lonely, and you can get a sense of feeling lonely from being isolated physically, emotionally, psychologically. You might just be stressed and feel like no one's willing to help you, and that will promote a sense of loneliness in your life. You can be, as I was, married and still feel alone in a marriage. So all these kinds of thoughts ran through my head as I'm sitting there playing with my unicorn sponge. And actually, most of the thinking happened in the morning because I was sitting there dwelling on this idea. And I wake up at like 5. So, because I'm weird, I'm a morning person. I used to go to the gym at 5. But I wake up now and I just sat there for a couple of minutes because I usually play on my phone. But I thought, no, not today. And I isolated myself and I'm sitting there thinking, why do I feel lonely today? And I think it was a combination of waking up alone after like years of living with someone in one form or another. Maybe feeling a bit tired and maybe just like a feed on from the, I don't know if you listened to that podcast yesterday where I was talking about man whoring, where I was talking about a guy that had posted something and it turned me off him on his Facebook. He'd posted some pictures that were just ugh. And so I'd sort of gone off him. And the result from that was maybe, in the forms of residual feeling, maybe feeling a bit lonely there because now that's one less person that I can't relate to. So maybe that was it, and you feel a bit shit after that. So, of course, what do you do when you're alone in bed? You flick the bean. But that's different, and I'll do a podcast on that later. We're all adults here, right? We're all going to talk about, jerking it at some point. So I'll do a podcast on that. You don't need to know about that now. So, what causes loneliness? There's lots of reasons. The last time I felt lonely, and I genuinely did, was when I separated from my ex-husband. And that was because everything was collapsing in on me. That was everything. That wasn't just a failure of marriage. Although I wouldn't deem it a failure as that, because I still learned a shitload. But I was, I was homeless, in debt, separated from this man who I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with. I had no sense of identity. All my family members were off doing their own thing. I was definitely going through the dark night of the soul. If you want to Google that, it's a pretty intense spiritual thing. It causes you to question absolutely everything in your life, everything. You will hit rock bottom and you'll start feeling like you're dying. You'll go into a depressive funk. It will be chaos. And you'll really start realigning what you want in life and what you value. But I went through that, what was that, like 2018? I could put a date on it, Australia Day 2018. That's when it started, that's when everything collapsed. There was a huge snap. Something snapped and everything plummeted. So that was my dark night of soul. And that was the last time I felt lonely. And that was because I genuinely had no one. I had my brother at the start of that year. I went to go live with him for a bit because I only had the clothes on my back and nowhere to live. So I was couch surfing. But even then, his wife kicked me out, sort of thing, because she's like, oh, we've got our own life to live, and, you know, and we've got people coming over and we need the room. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm homeless, but okay, fine. And it was at that point that I genuinely thought, I don't like my brother's wife. I'm going through a crisis. And I've been staying with you for, what, a month? And already you're trying to, you know, kick me out. So I don't know if I took the victim mentality with that, but I was not pleased with the way she reacted in that instance. It's like, is this maybe once in a lifetime thing that I have to go through? Hopefully once in a lifetime, right? God willing. And I really needed help. And I'm not the kind of person that asks for help. I just don't. I am devoutly self-sufficient. If I can do it, I will do it myself. So I came to my brother, and my brother's my only go-to guy. My only one. I can't go to my parents because they're fucking useless. My sisters have got their own lives, and they're just, they're not useless, but they're less willing to help because they kind of were raised with the same mindset where you stand on your own 2 feet and you deal. The girls in my family were raised different to the boys. My brother is more cuddly than my sisters, I will say that. My mum raised the girls to be, you know, self-sufficient, hardcore. You handle it, and if you can't handle it, you fucking find a way to handle it. My brother is lovely. So I don't know how he came out so different. He's the eldest, so he kind of looked after all us girls. So here was another extension of me needing help from my big brother. And he helped me. And of course, he said yes to me crashing with him. And I'm like, thank you, yes. And he was the one that I sort of ran into his arms when I was like, turned up his doorstep crying my eyes out. So yeah, for my brother, I'd drop anything, yeah. Yeah, sorry, getting a bit teary about that. Anyway, so, yeah, my sisters are a bit bitchy. This is just an extension of why I can't rely on girls, I don't think. But, you know, I hold women to a higher standard than men, I guess. I don't know. Probably because I am one. But, you know, when I had got kicked out of my brother's house by my sister-in-law, passive-aggressively, I had moved into my dead granddad's house, who had recently died. My granddad died in February, so I couch surfed with my brother for about a month. I moved into my dead granddad's house, who had died in the February of the same year. My nanny died in the May of the same year, so that was a weird year. So I was renovating that house because my parents wanted to get rid of it because, you know, they've got double mortgage on their house, so they're fucking useless with money. But it was very much a shell of a house. I had to get rid of all the furniture first. So by the time I was actually living in it properly, it was an echoey, cold place. It was very cold. It was very cavernous. It wasn't huge. It was just a, you know, 4-bedroom house. It was just a bungalow, really. But it was cold. And you could tell why the body hadn't dissolved quite quickly, because it was like an icebox. And when we found him, yeah, he'd been there a while, but it hadn't been that, you know, that bad. This is a bit dark, isn't it? I'm looking at it in biological terms. I'm not looking at it in a factual kind of emotional terms, because he was a bit of a bastard anyway. So when he went, it was not a problem. If he'd have been a good person, yes, I would have felt something there. But sometimes, unfortunately, we just got to deal with the fact that life is a bit better without some people in it. In a horrible way, right? He was a prick. But, you know, it was cavernous, it was cold, it echoed at night. I could hear, because there was a bar across the road, surprisingly in suburbia. There was a single pub and maybe a deli, and you could hear the noise at 10 o'clock at night. So it was a bit scary at times as well. Me, a girl living alone in this echoey house, I just didn't feel safe as well. So that contributed to a sense of loneliness, besides the world collapsing around me. And I had to deal with it on my own because everyone was busy and they had their lives. And of course, you know, part of adulting is to be able to deal with that shit on your own. You're not always going to have someone to run to fix your problems. I was lucky and I'm grateful that I had my brother at the start of it, because that was when it was really raw. I had him for a month. I got into my routine of going to the gym and everything right still. But then after like a month, I had to deal with being on my own alone, you know, and I was still trying to work and pay off this fucking debt and stuff like that. And it builds on, it's stressful. I will say it's stressful. And there were many nights where I would just sit there and I'd just bawl my fucking eyes out because it felt like the world was dying around me, so I couldn't fix it or anything like that. And that's where I developed a sense of loneliness in that sense. But after I started getting things back online and working into a routine and a structure, and the best thing you can do for that is journaling, I will say, because then you develop a plan as to how you want to proceed. You vent out all the negative shit and the horrible feelings. Even just talking to yourself. I mean, I was talking to myself a lot because I lived alone. I mean, who's going to sit there and judge you? Fuck it. Even if they did judge me now, I don't give a fuck, because I do talk to myself and I like it that way. Sometimes it's the most intelligent conversation you can have is with yourself. But, you know, you got to get that shit out. And I suppose it was a blessing that I was on my own, because I could just do it without fear of, you know, being controlled or rejected, or, you know, just generally someone turning around looking like you're a fucking weirdo. And I know I'm weird. I don't mind being weird. I own that now, because I enjoy the, you know, differences of what I am compared to other people. I know we've all got our own separate strengths, so yeah, some people are just good at other things compared to others. Some people are bad at other things compared to others. There's nothing wrong with that. But to be able to go into sort of forced hermit mode, if you will, while I was going through a separation and divorce, was a blessing. I mean, I still had to leave the house to go and do fucking work, run errands and stuff like that, but I spent a lot of my time just in this little echoey chamber of egginess, you know? It's like an eggshell. It was white by the time I finished. Everything was white. I painted everything white. All my furniture was white. My furniture is still white. It had started off this really dark, horrible place, actually, because, you know, my granddad Bob was weird, and he had like dark maroon walls, and, you know, if we're going into talking about entities, I'm a light entity, he's a dark entity. Everything in his house was sort of dark and ominous. Everything that I made it into was light and pleasant and very fucking clean looking. Some people don't enjoy that. Some people might find that blinding, but I needed it at the time because I felt clean at that point. I never got a hang of doing the garden though. It was a big garden. That's horrible. Still don't like that. Anyway, so what we come up to now is, after you set your goals and your routine and you get all that stuff down, the loneliness tends to go away. I found. I don't know about you guys if you're feeling lonely at this point. And then I found my ex-boyfriend, or I refound my ex-boyfriend now, who is now my ex-boyfriend. And so you get distracted by that kind of situation where you're trying to develop a relationship, even though it was a terrible one and we were absolutely not matched up at all. Nothing in common. And everything he told me that we had in common was actually a lie in the end, because he had faked it, trying to, you know, get in my pants and make it look like we were a good match. So that was a depressing outcome. So even though I had high hopes for that, because I'm like, oh, we're so similar. And it turns out, no, we're not. You were lying. Right, okay. And I put him on a pedestal as well. I tried to keep it level. I tried to look at it critically as I went into that relationship, because I'm a bit older now, and I'm like, yeah, I'm skeptical of some things now. So I'm not as naive as I was when I got married. But, you know, you go in trying to make it work, and you stick to where it works, and then you got to deal with the realization of some things just will not work, and there is nothing going on here that is salvageable. So, of course, you block them in every format, and apparently they stalk you. So I'm not suggesting you get one of those boyfriends. Some people would find it romantic. I found it scary. But he hasn't tried to contact me since, so I'm pretty stoked about that. So, oddly enough, it leads us to today, where I felt a slight bit of twinge, particularly after realizing the next guy that I might like was actually a bit of a man whore, or presenting as a man whore, I should say. A very unattractive trait. Just, yeah, I don't find it attractive. Some girls would, or some guys would, I suppose. It just screams liability to me. I don't know why they do it. It's an insecurity. And just, yeah, doesn't help me form any kind of idea that it might be long-term or valuable or worth investing in. Because, you know, if he's making himself so readily available to everyone, then anyone can get it, and what's the point in that? That goes both ways as well. That's not just me looking at guys, that's guys looking at girls. I mean, if someone makes themselves readily available too easy to get hold of sexually, then who's to say they're going to stay? Or who's to say they're going to be loyal to you? So what's the point, you know? And you can call it sort of sexual liberation or whatever it is, or freedom, and you go, well, I call it cheap and tacky, so I'm just not going there. So you're not worth it. You're not worth the hassle later on down the road. Wouldn't give it a year, give it 2.5 years, as I did with my ex-boyfriend. Yeah, so woke up this morning, felt a bit lonely, went into the shower, and I'm sitting there thinking, who else feels at my age lonely? And I felt lonely in my marriage, so, you know, I know what it is to, you know, be with someone and still feel lonely. I remember one point when I was with my ex-husband, towards the end actually, we're in the middle of the night and he was having a fever dream. You know, like those, you know, sexy fever dreams, you know, where it's all heat and, yeah. I don't know if anyone has those. And he was talking to himself in his sleep and stuff like that. And I was trying to listen to stuff like that because I wanted to understand what was going on. I thought, oh, it's cute, he's having a fever dream sort of thing. Not a horrible one, it was actually like one of those sexual ones. I got weird hobbies. Anyway, let me listen to your dreams. But he suddenly turned over and faced me directly in the face, and he could see that I was, you know, like, I was amused by this. Because it's cute when you're with someone, you're like, oh, someone's having a wet dream, ooh, cute. Anyway, and as soon as he realised it was me facing him, it shut down. So obviously it wasn't about me. So he was having a sexy dream about someone else. And it was little moments like that I realised that the marriage was over at that point, because he's not even thinking about me in that way. And that presented a sense of loneliness in the relationship, because at the time you don't want to let go, because you've invested so much time and energy in this arrangement. And I was with him 16 years. So I started dating him at 17. I married him at 27. I think it was 27. It was 2011. So we'd been together 10 years before I even thought about marrying him. I thought I knew him, right? And I divorced him at 33, so after 6 years of marriage. And I felt so lonely towards the end, and I didn't want to leave this marriage because I don't believe in divorce. It is only, even now that I am divorced, a last resort where everything else has been exhausted and there's absolutely no way. I mean, I look for the absolute definition of irreconcilable differences when I look at divorce. It's like you have to, not just because you're bored and you fancy someone else, but you've tried absolutely fucking everything to sort this thing out. Even then, I was still not ready to go. I wasn't ready. I knew it was the right thing to do because he didn't love me. He wasn't faithful to me. He was being disrespectful to me like every 10 minutes or something like that. It wasn't even just on a daily basis. It was constant. Nothing I did could please him. I was ruining myself, my mental health, my emotional health. He was taking the piss and taking advantage. And in the end, him giving me an ultimatum that we had to have an open marriage or he'd leave me was the final straw. In that, all of my loneliness that I developed with regards to him and us in the final couple of years of the marriage, it collapsed it. I never felt so alone. And before he had given me this ultimatum, he had gone to a trip to Bali with his brother and a friend, and God knows who else, right? And he had left me behind. And I'm all right with going on my own holidays on my own. I quite like it because then you get to do what you want to do. But the fact that he was more inclined to take someone else, and he had somehow managed to book a second room. So I don't know what he had intended to do over there or what he actually did over there, but for some reason he needed another room away from his brother and his friend. So I'm like, you've got someone there, haven't you? He's like, so I'm sitting there thinking, I told him, why did you book another room? It's like, oh, the aircon wasn't working. It's like, that's bullshit. You've got someone else there. He's meeting someone over there. And then I read, and he'd left his messenger open or something like that on the computer, and I don't have any kind of details or anything for that. I didn't log in, I don't go looking for it, but he left it open. I was sitting there reading the messaging that's going on between him and his brother and the friend, male friend, of course. And the three of them had gone over together, and oh Christ, I dropped them off the airport. Anyway, and I was reading the back and forth, and he was talking about how he was flirting with girls in bars and things like that, and chatting up girls, and I'm sitting there going, what the fuck is going on? So not only was I paying for this holiday for him to go over to Bali, I was also watching the back and forth about him and his fucking friends in the bar chatting up girls. And I'm sitting going, this is a man I've been with for 16 years. What is happening? What the fuck is this? And you sort of, it all mounted up. And you never feel more alone than when this person that you fucking practically worshipped for 16 years suddenly makes you feel like nothing. Oh, well, not suddenly, it's been a gradual build-up, but at the same time, you're like, what the fuck is this about? And it all contributed to the failing of the marriage, just because he just did not respect me. He didn't want to be there. It was clear he was, too much of a coward to actually say anything about it. And even then, the ultimatum came at a very late time in the arrangement. He just couldn't bring himself to do the right thing and say, this has been happening, I'm not happy, and I want to leave. It had to be me calling the final shot. Because he was a fucking coward. Which bugged the shit out of me. I could go on for days about how fucked up that arrangement was. I am feeling very empathetic to anyone who has to go through that kind of shit, and I can only imagine how much worse it might be later on in life, if especially when you've given your absolute everything to this one person and they turn at you like in your 40s, 50s, and you've got kids. Oh my god, even worse, all this kind of thing. So if you can nip that in the bud early, it's a case of just having the courage and the balls to say, this isn't working for me, I need to go. And I'm not saying run away from it. You should still look at all the aspects of it. Will it work? Is it worth it? But no one you love or who claims to love you should make you feel lonely in a relationship. So this whole experience has sort of jaded my vision of what I want from relationships now. I'm definitely more discerning with who I want to be with, particularly with my ex-boyfriend, actually. I was able to nip that shit in the bud quite early, 2.5 years in. It's early for me, considering the one before that was 16 years. But I started seeing the same or similar traits and behaviors that my ex-husband was exhibiting. I'm going, I know where this is going. I don't want to do this. And I know it would have led to me feeling lonely. And particularly towards the end of my relationship with my ex-boyfriend, he was going to the pub to stare at girls and hang out with his fuckboy friends whilst I was at home or whilst I was at work. And he just didn't care. I mean, and in the last 2 weeks of the relationship with my ex-boyfriend, I was crying. I was just crying on and off because I was so fucking miserable and alone. And he never made any kind of attempt to physically comfort me or to stay and to talk it out or to make me feel better. In fact, he was actually stonewalling me at the time. So I was trying to connect with this person who clearly didn't want to be there, would rather be at the pub with his friends and other fuckboys. And I knew at that point just to shut down and just to not bother keep going with this, because I knew he's not the one. If he's making me feeling horrible, miserable and lonely in the relationship, not making any attempt to try and help me or make me feel better or anything like that, he's clearly not the one, because he doesn't give a fuck about me. So I had no guilt when I left that guy. When we got evicted, which he didn't fucking tell me about, I had to go and look for the information. We were getting evicted. Ooh, nice bike. Sorry, I'm looking at motorbikes somewhere. Someone's parked a motorbike on the side of the road. Oh, there he is. Okay. But he wasn't going to tell me, because he was stonewalling, and he was that level of pettiness where he was like, well, she's stonewalling me. I'm not fucking stonewalling you. You are doing me. And it was that level of pettiness that he had that I knew it's not going to work. And I just felt more alone, and I'm isolated, and fuck it. I don't have to deal with this shit. I would rather be single than dealing with this sense of loneliness when I'm with someone, And, I don't think he's ever going to develop the understanding that what he did or how it didn't work. He just sees me as abandoning him at this point, which is why he kept trying to email me or message me and shit like that to try and get me back. And I'm sitting there going, it's not going to happen, dude. I know what you are. I know how you operate in a relationship. I don't want to know. So I just don't understand why people are like that. If you love someone, you should be making them feel like they belong with you, right? Not in a controlling, creepy kind of way, but in a, I feel like we should be together. We should be supporting each other. We should be nurturing each other's endeavors and things like that, making sure everyone feels like they belong and they're in a safe place. I never felt safe with him. Never felt safe with him. I never trusted him. I know that much. And he would crack the shits because I don't trust him, but he was also doing shit on the side that made me not trust him. And in the end, when he tried to find out where I lived from my gym, I really didn't feel safe about it. I'm like, I really don't like this shit. It's like, nope. Because I had moved away and, blocked him on every front. And then he's like, where does she live now? That was a bit fucking creepy. I was like, why? So you can do a drive-by? What are you going to do? Break into a house? I just want to talk to you. The fuck you do, buddy? So I feel safe though in my house because I know there's like a double security system you have to use to get into the fucking building. But no one you're with should make you feel lonely. And I sympathize for old people because I know these people might have had an entire lifetime with this other person who they're married to, and then suddenly they just die. I know when I left my husband in a divorce, I wasn't ready, and I felt like shit then. I can only imagine what it is when you've had an entire lifetime with someone and they die. That's crippling. I really feel sympathy for them. Because I know it would be magnified compared to whatever I had tenfold. I don't know if you ever recover from that. I mean, my granddad remarried after his wife died. It took a few years, but my good granddad, I should say, my bad granddad never remarried. My good granddad remarried, and he found a nice woman that made him happy. And they just, he died before she did. So there is possibility for love after death and divorce, of course. I would hope so, right? But, I'm not the kind of person who would rush into another relationship just for the sake of saying I have someone. I gave my ex-boyfriend a chance because I had held this candle for him for 15 years. When I actually dated him, I dealt with the reality that he was actually a piece of shit. And I didn't want that. So I would thoroughly suggest living with someone before you actually marry them or anything like that. Because I was leaning in towards that. I'm going, oh yeah, this could lead to marriage. And then you actually start interacting with them. You go, actually, no, it fucking won't. So getting to know someone is invaluable, right? You know their flaws. You know what they're going to be like when you have an argument, things like that. I'm glad that I only spent, 6 months living with him to actually figure out that. Because there's this weird de facto law in Australia, though. If you live with someone for 2 years or something, they can take some of your money or something like that. And I'm just like, that is fucked up. I mean, what if they're a real piece of shit and they abuse you and stuff like that, and then they can come after you for like alimony and stuff? But I think there has to be extreme circumstances. I don't think you could just do it on a whim. But that's cruel. So what can we do to actually alleviate the sense of loneliness? As I said before, when I was talking about when I lived alone in the renovating house, my dead granddad's house, the best things you can do is sort of try and get out of your misery. I journaled a lot because I needed to get my thoughts out. You can go talk to someone. If you're the social kind, I would suggest going and talking to someone. If you've got people to talk to, I didn't. So I talked to myself. I'm not crazy, I swear. But try and find things you like. And you need to develop a sense of self as well. You need to be comfortable in going and doing things on your own. I used to go to the movies a lot. I loved going to the movies. I still love going to the movies. I haven't been recently, though. I should. I stopped going when they stopped letting me bring my own snacks. I was pissed off with that. Bastards. But, I went to a shit ton of movies when I was separated, just because I love doing that kind of stuff. I went to go and see some museums and stuff like that. I would go on these little side missions where I would do just what I fucking want to do, and I wouldn't have to ask someone else whether they were okay with it or if they wanted to go and do it or, because I tend to, when I'm with someone, I tend to want to make sure that they're having a good time, and it's terrible because you don't have a good time yourself. So the perks of traveling on your own, and I did do a few tours on my own, is that you get to see what you want to do and what interests you, and you don't have to worry yourself about whether this person is bored or whining or, if they're having a bad time or if shit's not going right. I mean, if you're on your own and shit doesn't go right, you sort of you fix it yourself, don't you? You're like, oh, okay. So it's not that stressful. But if you're worried that someone else is pissed off that something's not going right, then you're going to be worried about them and the shit that's not going right. Which is what I found when I took my ex-husband on chores. Oh, Christ, it was like traveling with a fucking kid. It really was. I would never do anything like that again, I think. Unless you got like a good travel buddy. You gotta have someone who's, you know, up for challenges and strategies. You know, I need someone who's good at projects. If they're good at projects, then I know they're gonna be okay with traveling and shit going wrong, because they'll just work with me to fix it. But other than that, I'm quite happy traveling on my own. I like that as well, because you find new things and you find yourself as well. You need to develop your sense of autonomy a bit further. And I say, as adults, we are autonomous for the most part, but at the same time, you do tend to lose yourself in marriages, relationships, looking after kids, jobs, things like that. Your identity is built up of the structures that are around you. So in my identity, I'm a teacher, or I was a wife, or, you know, I'm a sister. You know, all these things contribute to, you know, strings attached to other people and conditions that are formed, which don't exactly promote independence. So you've got to be mindful of that. Try and find something that's worth living for, if you can. Some people have kids. Some people walk out of a divorce situation and say, thank God I've got my kids. I didn't walk out of that with kids. I walked out with debt and shit, which was kind of a downside. Some people live for their kids, and if that's cool, if that's what you want to do, go for it. I don't think I could do that, because my job involves being stressfully looking after someone else's kids. So, and I feel like we're more accountable. I've watched the parents in action. I'm going, we take better care of your kids than you do. It's fascinating. Probably because we've got that legal obligation as well. Yeah, you've got to find your sense of self. Even if you're lonely, try and find something that you and you alone might be interested in. You know, stop relying on other people to make you happy. And unfortunately, yes, it is a bit cliche, but yeah, eventually you're going to be on your own at some point. You're going to have to deal with being alone, the resonating echo of an empty house at some point. And you're just going to have to be okay with that. I wish I could sort of relate more with the feelings that I used when I overcame those sort of echoey feelings. If I could describe them better, I would, but you'd have to be there to feel it and to understand it. And somehow you're going to have to make peace with the fact that there is a silence to being alone. Some people are scared of the silence. My oldest brother is, I've only got one brother, is, I feel there is a strong element that he doesn't like being alone. So even when he is given time to himself, like if his wife goes out and takes the baby, he will still try and fill that space with other people. He's either, I don't know if that's some kind of weird codependence thing or not, but you really need to find a way to be okay with just being on your own. It's people, because at some point you're gonna be on your own and people are gonna freak the fuck out, because you can't grab for someone to make you feel better or something. And I swear that's how, you know, substance abuse starts, because you can't find people, so what do? You go to substances, you go to alcohol, you go to drugs or something like that. And that's not healthy at all. Neither is relying heavily on someone else to validate your existence, really, is it? So loneliness is not always a bad thing. The thing to take away from it is, and I'm going to have to start summing this up because I'm sitting outside my school. Loneliness is not bad. It's a space to start developing you. It is time and space to start looking at what you like, what you are, and what you value, what your norms and values are, what you want to contribute, and you start making a plan, okay? It is introspective time. Extrospective, if that is a word, is where you're looking for validation from other people. You're looking at what other people are seeing you as and saying, okay, this is my value. You can do that if you want, but you've also got to have the introspective. You've got to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, look someone in the eye and say, this is me. And I don't give a fuck what you say or do, because this is what I'm standing for, sort of thing. Loneliness is just the scary side of that. Okay, and there's a scary side to everything. There's a scary side to love. There's a scary side to being happy, because you're like, okay, is it drug induced? There's a scary side to everything. People only want to see the positive, and it's like, no, there is value in the negative as well. And people are just scared of it because it's a negative thing. There's a stigma attached to negative feelings. There's nothing wrong with feeling lonely. There's nothing wrong with depression. It is a jumping point. It's the starting point. You've got to use it as fuel and as a safe space to start creating. Okay, I'm going to have to leave it there, my darlings, because I've just seen a bunch of my kids go past, so they're looking at me like I'm crazy now. I hope you have a fantastic day. I've got a bunch of podcasts to upload. I'm going to try and do it either today or tonight. Hopefully I'm catching up. Have a fantastic day. It is Wednesday, Odin's Day, if you were into that. I am. Odin's Day is a day for thought and reflection. Let's use that in our addressing of our loneliness if you feel lonely. If you don't, fantastic. I mean, I'm not going to make people want to feel lonely. It is a bit of a morbid topic, but I'm all right with taking on the darkness. So let's go with it. I know from darkness comes light, from chaos comes creation. So let's go with that. Okay, take it easy today. We're halfway. Let's get on to the Friday soon, huh? All right, bye.